And then pectineal line is going to be much smaller coming from the medial aspect, going straight in. So they form almost like a Y, just like so. We're also going to have condyles, which you will recall from terminology, a condyle is a smooth, rounded, articular process, just meaning that it's a smooth, rounded bump that's going to form a joint with another bone. And they're just named after which side they're on. One's on the inside medial, one's on the outside lateral. We'll see what that looks like here in a moment. And then in between them, there's actually a space or a shallow depression called the intercondylar fossa. On the front of the bone, this intercondylar fossa is found on the posterior aspect. On the anterior aspect, we have something called the patellar groove, which is going to be a groove in the bone that the patella, which is the kneecap, is going to be able to slide back and forth on. We also have two structures called epicondyles, and they're named after what they're on the inside or whether they're on the outside. And what an epicondyle is epi meaning on or upon. These are just bumps that sit on the condyles, and they're just named after which one they sit on. So the medial epicondyle will sit on the medial condyle, whereas the lateral epicondyle will sit on the lateral condyle. Also, what we want to note here, this next structure, adductor tubercle, this is found on the medial aspect of the bone. So it's found on the inside. So the same side that we find the head of the femur on. So that's medial. And when we get to muscles later on, the adductor magnus is going to be what inserts onto this structure here. We're also going to cover the popliteal surface. And if, again, recall back in chapter 1, the popliteal region is the area behind the knee. And so this area on the posterior aspect of the femur that would be roughly around the back of the knee is called the popliteal surface. So moving on to pictures, we see the head of the femur, this rounded structure that's going to sit in the acetabulum, allow the femur to rotate around. The neck is going to connect the head to the rest of the bone. We have our greater trochanter on the lateral side of the bone here. We see a little bit of the lesser trochanter. We'll see a little bit better when we get to the posterior view. And we see the intertrochanteric line right here, this rough line that goes from the greater trochanter all the way across to the lesser trochanter. So let's highlight this just real quick. Right there. Now, depending on what model you're looking at, this may or may not be there. So I always highly recommend using the intertrochanteric crest on the posterior side to correctly identify this is the posterior aspect, as it's a really large structure and it's super easy to find. Now, looking at the posterior, we still see the head, we still see the neck, we see greater trochanter still. Now we see lesser trochanter much better here from the posterior view. And the reason I know it's the posterior view is this intertrochanteric crest right here, this big lip, this big ridge going between the two trochanters right here. Now I can also see, if we went down a little bit further, we'd see that Linea Aspera, but I can see the pectineal line right here and the Gluteal Tuberosity you can see really well right here, this kind of rough projection right here. So let's just color these in just real quick. We have our pectineal line, this really small line just like so. And our gluteal tuberosity is very easy to see right here. So they're going to form the top of the Y. So as we move down here, so you still see all this up here. We see the Linea Aspera right here, this mountain ridge right here down the posterior shaft. So going back to that little simplified drawing we had Linea Aspera here. It's like so. Pectineal line right there. And then we have our gluteal tuberosity right there. So they form that Y shape. And so let's erase it so we can get a better picture of it. Just like so. So now hopefully you can see it a little bit better. Now going down, you have to take my word for it. This is the front of the femur. We're looking at the distal end. And what you're seeing here is the patellar surface. And the patellar groove is just the groove that sits on that surface right there. So that's where the patella can slide back and forth. We can see a little bit of the condyles here, so I'll highlight the lateral condyle. This big round structure. We'll see a little bit better on the posterior aspect. But the epicondyle is just going to be the smaller bump that's actually going to be sitting on the condyle right there.